This is the textbook that changed my life. It is a beginner-level Japanese textbook called Genki. It's the first in a two-part series, and this is the book that I used during my first year of studying Japanese. It starts with the very basics, like the three different writing systems in Japanese. It walks you through all of those step by step, and after that you move on to just very basic phrases like greetings and how to say hello and goodbye and thank you and stuff like that. And then it moves on to just very basic conversations like, excuse me, what time is it right now? Oh, it's 12:30. Really simple stuff, not too overwhelming for beginners. And it also will slowly but surely walk you through all of the basic vocabulary, the most important vocabulary words to know in daily life. Of course, there's like grammar lessons and stuff, so you learn how to put together basic sentences from the very beginning. Eventually, over the course of 12 chapters, you start learning how to say more complex ideas like, I ate too much for dinner last night and now I have a stomachache. Help me, doctor. Things like that. And of course, it also covers kanji, which many consider to be the hardest part of learning Japanese because it's a very complex writing system. But in my opinion, the curriculum teaches the kanji in a pretty logical order, so it's not too overwhelming at first. So I used this book myself when I was studying Japanese in college, and over the course of about 2 semesters, we went through the entire book from start to finish, all 12 chapters. And I think that was enough to, give me the ability to have very basic survival level communication in Japanese, which I think is pretty good, honestly, because I remember when I studied Spanish in elementary school and middle school for I think over a total of maybe 6 years, and I didn't learn how to do anything remotely useful. But yeah, this book is part of a 2-book series. The second book, Genki 2, will take you to the more intermediate level. And really, once you're done with that, I would say you're ready to start jumping into native level materials. So I'll talk about 3 things I like about this textbook. One of them, like I mentioned earlier, is that it has a very logical progression. So you start with, the most simple but most necessary vocabulary words and grammar points and kanji, and then it gradually works its way up to more advanced stuff. For grammar, you start with very simple things like, this is a pen, what is your name, and stuff like that. And then you move up to, you learn how to ask questions that are like, what are you studying? What's your favorite? What's your hobby? And stuff like that. And then you learn how to put together longer sentences, like, today I got up at 6 a.m. and studied, or, let's go to the cafeteria and have lunch. And then you learn how to say things like, oh, I didn't sleep last night because I had too much homework, very relatable. And the grammar explanations in this book I think are really solid. It doesn't over-explain. It gives a good number of examples that I think are pretty easy to follow. Obviously there's a lot of debate about what's the best way to study grammar. Is it something we should really intentionally study and try to understand, or is it something that we should try to just kind of learn naturally through using the language? I think both are good approaches. You should use both of those if you're learning a second language as an adult, especially if you don't have a lot of opportunities to use Japanese in your daily life. The only thing you can do sometimes is just intentionally read explanations about grammar and try to understand it that way. And I think this textbook does a good job with that. Another thing I like about this book is that there's a bit of a story. Each chapter has some dialogue practice, and the dialogue uses these 2 characters, Takeshi and Mary, and there's kind of a little love story between them. That's really, it's nothing dramatic, but it's cute, and the book has a bunch of characters that are quite endearing, I think. You know, it's a book that's kind of fun. It doesn't take itself too seriously. Another nice thing about this book is that in addition to teaching, you know, the language, it also has a bunch of like little mini lessons about culture and about, you know, how, you know, what life in Japan is like. For example, like you've got, you know, this little thing about like different foods in Japan, another thing about how public transportation works, another little thing here about, you know, how Japanese people celebrate New Year's. And, you know, it's just nice to have all of these little cultural lessons too, because, you know, as you all know, language and culture are very much tied together, and it's good if you're learning a language, you should try to understand the culture of that country as well. And I think this book does a good job just introducing, you know, literal cultural points in a way that's kind of fun and not too overwhelming. So one potential downside of this book is that I think this book was kind of designed to be used in a group setting or a classroom setting where you have other classmates, because there's a lot of like speaking exercises that would require you to pair with a classmate or something. And obviously, you know, it's a bit harder to do that if you're just using the book by yourself for self-study. I don't think that's a deal breaker, of course. If you have like some friends who are also studying Japanese, you know, these could provide opportunities to practice with them. Or if you have a one-on-one teacher, then it's not a problem either. But if you're purely self-studying, there are some parts of this book that might not be so useful to you. So yeah, those are my thoughts on this book. There are a bunch of ways to learn Japanese now. There are apps, there are online courses. You know, some people just learn by watching a bunch of YouTube videos and TV. Those are all valid ways, and a textbook is just one of those ways. If you, like, my advice would be to use a little bit of everything. Like, if you have a textbook, that's great. This would work best as one part of your overall study plan. I think it's very important to have a good balance of study methods involving a lot of like active listening practice, speaking practice, and of course like more formal methods where you kind of like try to memorize vocabulary and grammar and stuff like that. A combination of those things will keep the experience fresh and more sustainable, I think. If you have the chance to borrow the book or find a sample of it online, then you can give it a try and see if it works for you. If it does, that's great. You can use the entire book and get a lot of benefits from it. And if not, you can drop it all together, you know, and stick with methods that work better for you. There is no right or wrong answer to learning a language. But yeah, just to give a bit of inspiration, back in the year 2010, I picked up this book for the first time. I started as a complete beginner. I didn't know how to say a single word in Japanese besides like hello and thank you. And then after finishing this book, moving on to the next book in the series, and then becoming a more advanced student, I eventually moved to Japan, got a job here as a translator and interpreter, later switched to a big tech company where I continued using my language abilities, and I've been living in the country now for 10 years. I'm a permanent resident now, and I don't have any plans to go back to my home country. So, you know, you never know where taking one small step might change your life in the future. So yeah, that's my review of this book and my personal experience with it. So I hope it's been helpful. Thank you.